What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Hawk Talk on Melrose. Thank you for tuning in as always. Before we begin, just want to talk a little bit about where you can find us, obviously, on pretty much any podcast platform there is. And then our best platform that I like, and probably Tyler, you like, is YouTube. You can see our faces on there. And when we get into the season, after games, we'll show like highlights and, go through some plays and stuff like that. We did that last year. So YouTube's like our best platform that we like, but you can find us on pretty much anything and everything. So want to get that out of the way. And of course, obviously, make sure you leave a review and tell other people. That's the only way we can get this podcast to grow a little bit. So let's get into it today. We are talking some 2023 season observations with our special guest, a longtime listener and a long time, well, it used to be a while ago when he used to be on every single episode, and that is Kolby. What's going on, man?
Well, I would say I'm a long time. I was one of the co-founders of the initial podcast. So
You were.
it's good to be back. I'm excited for this year. I feel like every year we come on around this time and we're all just pumped, the last couple years dating back to, I go back to the COVID season, 2021, when our 2020, when the season wasn't happening. And then 2021, when we were just ecstatic to have football back. And I remember feeling so pumped for stuff to happen. And here we are 2 years later. And I think we're entering a season of some fun stuff for Iowa athletics, pending the health of a lot of people. But I'm excited.
Yes, sir. Tyler, how are you doing tonight? I don't want to ramble on and not say hi to you. How's your day going?
Obviously good to be back. Day's over. Work's done. We're talking some Iowa football. We got Kolby on. Obviously, it's good to see Kolby. I feel like the only time I see Kolby is around football season, so we know we're getting close. That's for sure.
Yes, sir.
That is.
We got good. Well, I was to say we got this pod. We've got our draft, which we do over Zoom, and then obviously you'll be there week 1, so I'll be seeing a lot of Kolby here in the next month.
As of this moment, we are 2 weeks and 3 days until we're walking into Kinnick.
Yeah. It's crazy. Literally this Saturday, it's 14 days.
I feel like this summer has flown by, and then I feel like this month has dragged.
I still think this August has still gone really quick. I think this might have been the fastest summer ever. Cause we went to Kolby, when we went to the bachelor party, that was the first week of June. And that seems like that was just forever yesterday. Ago. And that was we're coming up on almost 3 months since we went there. Yeah. It's crazy to think. Well, Tyler and I probably won't be talking a whole lot this episode, because this will be probably the only episode Kolby will be on until we get into the season, when he'll probably hop on from time to time. So I really want to hear his thoughts on some different topics. Some of these topics Tyler and I have talked about, so just a fair warning, but I think Kolby will provide, his own kind of opinion and expertise with some of that stuff. So I'm really anxious to hear kind of what his thoughts are. So I guess to begin, and I asked this question to Tyler 2 weeks ago, but off season, what were your thoughts? Obviously last year we ended the year off, and at that point we knew Cade was coming, but just before we knew Cade, it almost felt like, wow, are we kind of entering some rough years ahead, because we don't really know who our quarterback's going to be. Offense is horrible. And we go into the offseason and kind of a new light was flickered on, and new life in the program with the offseason changes. What are your general thoughts on all that?
Yeah, well, first I have 2 things I want to preface. One, I see the Swarm vodka and beer in the background. Dad brought down Swarm beer. I wish I would have had one while I was recording this episode to represent from Nashville.
Yes, sir.
And 2,
Colin clearly is all decked out in Iowa attire.
Yeah,
back there,
yeah.
So,
I need to work on my background next time.
Clearly.
And then second, I went back last week, as I normally do, and I go back and listen to old podcasts, and I go back to last year, and we were coming off a year where we had risen up to number 2 in the rankings, and then things got a little hairy, and then we were told that there was changes at the offense, and that Spencer was looking better, and that there were more playmakers, and I try to think back to last year at this time when we hopped on this pod and gave our predictions, and us just saying, man, I really hope that there doesn't have to be giant changes, but we want to look functional on offense. And then we go to that first game and we don't score a touchdown. And then we hop on that Sunday and do a post-reaction pod. And I think it was like a therapy session. I think I actually said, this is a chance for me to vent.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't believe what I had watched, and I actually had zero fun watching that game. And I said in the podcast, I said, listen, our defense was fun to watch, but I had no fun actually watching the extent of the game with what was happening. And so that brings me to this year. I think we got roped right back into feeling like things are going to happen. And I think that this year, the coaching staff actually did make changes, starting with the quarterback position, to try to make some actual changes. And yes, Brian Ferentz is back. We all know that. We all know the contract stipulation, 25 points per game. But not only did we just get Cade, we went out and improved in positions that we actually needed to improve on. And yes, some could say that, last year's room at this point last year was better in the wide receiver room than it is right now with Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce and all those. But I think there's the potential. That's where I'm at. I think the potential of this year's group outweighs last year's. And I think that once we get some chemistry with that position group, I think that can be a pretty serviceable group. You have Nico, who we know what we have. He's a great route runner, and he can catch the ball. I think our surprise, we don't know what's really out there yet, but has shown flashes, is Deontay Vines. I think that he's an asset. And then you have our two transfers that I think are high level players. I think Seth Anderson was very under recruited out of the transfer portal. I think he showed that last year that he has playmaking ability. He showed a little bit of that at Kids Day. And then there's Caleb Brown, which we all never expected an Ohio State receiver to transfer to Iowa. But when it happened, we were all up in arms. And I think, I've tried my best to temper expectations there too, because I know that things are going to be different than what they were at Ohio State. And granted, he had caught one pass, and so he's still super young. But he's probably not going to be asked to do as much right away until he really learns the playbook. So I'm trying to temper my expectations there. But that goes back to the whole offseason of, I think there were wholesale changes. And I think right now it's a wait and see game come Saturday, September 2nd, or whatever that date is, to see if those changes take place. And so I think there's optimism. I think there's reason to be excited. I think, a lot of hinges on the offensive line, because the offensive line was not good last year. And the Kids Day performance, I obviously I wasn't there, but I think that there was brighter spots along the offensive line than there was last year, but there's still a lot of work to do. I think that we still don't have our right tackle position figured out. And I think it was all a little bit of a surprise that Kolby wasn't out there starting either. So all that to say, I think I'm encouraged with the changes that happened so far this offseason, but now you need to put pen to paper, and we need to see those results. So I think we come back on here in 2 weeks after that first game, and I think we'll know quite a bit. Now, my bias and Iowa fan in me tells me come Saturday, September 2nd, pending the health of Cade McNamara, that we're going to score some points. I think there's too much pressure on Brian Ferentz for that not to happen. But it's still a wait and see game. So that's where I'm at. I love the offseason changes and the additions that we brought in from the transfer portal, but we need to see results.
So one thing with two things actually, okay, the Brian Ferentz thing. The one thing I will say to argue with that is, last year, you could say the same thing last year. Like going to last year, he had a lot of pressure, and why did we not make the necessary changes last year? So that's the only thing I will say there. And then also with the wide receivers, I think we're feeling better about the wide receivers this year than last year at this time last year, because because I went back and you actually came on this same week last year. It was like August 18th. It's obviously August 16th right now that we're recording. And that episode, I listened the first beginnings of it. And at that time, Keegan Johnson was hurt and we had no idea what was going to happen there. Nico Reganey just got hurt the week prior at the Kids Day. And so
Deontay
we were
Vines had gotten hurt.
Yep. And so we were literally down to like Arlen Bruce. And then like you even made the comment, you're like, well, we gotta hope Jacob Bostic, who was a true freshman, obviously he didn't end up, he got hurt. So like this year, as long as we stay healthy, like I'm feeling a lot better about our wide receiver group.
Well, yeah, we went into last year's game with what, 2 scholarship receivers, and one of those
bad.
Both of those scholarship receivers are no longer there. One's no longer playing football. So, yeah, I do feel a lot better about that room. I think it might take a second for results to really start happening, but it's good to have some playmakers, and not just playmakers at the first and second position, but to have Nico, to have Deontay Vines, to have Caleb Brown, to have Seth Anderson, to have Jacob Bostic if he comes back from injury, to have a Jarrett Bowie who has been impressing in fall camp. Like, there's options there that we didn't have last year. Now they all have to stay healthy and perform. But yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah. So this next question, I'll ask Tyler this one because I don't think we've ever even talked about this. But besides Cade, because obviously Cade is a huge asset to us. Who do you think is going to be at the end, after it's all said and done, probably the most impactful transfer from this year? And like I said, the easy answer is to say Cade. Like that's an easy answer. And you could say Cade, but like there has to be someone else, because let's make it a little fun here.
All right. Well,
yeah, I mean, go ahead. Yeah, you go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say, I think, for me, it's probably going to be, for me, one of the wide receivers, just because of what we lost in the offseason. Obviously, we lost Arlen Bruce. We lost Keegan Johnson. We still have Nico, and I think Nico is obviously a huge key to, our wide receiver room and our offense, but we're going to need another guy, right?
Yeah.
We know what we have in our tight ends, but we really need another wide receiver to step up. And I think Caleb Brown or Seth Anderson could be the answer there. I just think our defense is still going to be really good. I know we got Nick Jackson. I think he'll be a stud. But offensively, there's only one way to go, and that's up, right? And I think to do that, one of the wide receivers that we got could be not only very impactful, but also very important to what we're doing.
Yeah, I think where I'm with the wide receiver position, because it's been bad for so long, outside of, a couple of those years with Brandon Smith and Marset, I tend to downplay it a little more. And I'm genuinely curious on how much they'll be used. And I think that's probably just PTSD from our offense the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you said, Cade's our most impactful transfer. We will go as far as he takes us. And that's why all of us were freaking out when he got hurt at Kids Day a couple days ago. I think outside of him, I think it's going to be Eric All. I think that guy has a chance to be like an all Big Ten, potentially All-American type player. I think he's that good. He was a team captain at Michigan, 2021. He had developed a great, chemistry with Cade, and he was in line to be the next big thing at Michigan. And then injuries kind of derailed and their relationship fell apart. But I think, the way we use our tight ends, I think Brian needs to use a lot of 2 tight end sets this year.
Yep.
I mean, Sam Laporta goes off to the NFL. How many times can you say Sam Laporta, he goes off the NFL, he's going to be a loss, but like our tight end room really didn't become worse. Like, yes, Sam Laporta is a great asset, but it's about the same. And I think Eric All is that talented. So his stats might not look as gaudy because of having to share the room with Luke Lachey, but I think he will be a big impact. I think, especially coming in, already having that established chemistry with Cade, I think you'll probably see him be a little bit of a security blanket for Cade as they continue to grow in the offense.
So one of the questions actually I had on here, might as well just skip to that part, or that question was, since we're talking the tight end room, though, is who will have the bigger year? Will it be Luke Lachey or Eric All? And it's a tough one. And I'm anxious to hear your guys' answers. For me, I would say I would honestly maybe say Eric All over Luke Lachey, even though I think Luke might have more of an upside maybe, but I just think that chemistry with Cade and Eric in 2021, I think is going to kind of translate to like this year. I think Eric's going to be Cade's safety blanket because he knows him the most. Like he trusts him probably the most out of everyone out there. So I could see Eric All actually having a better year than Luke Lachey this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly a coin flip. I think they're really good tight ends. Obviously Iowa, we try to utilize the tight end, especially in our offense. I think, like you said, if we have a lot of 2 tight end sets, both guys are going to get a lot of opportunities. And the familiarity and chemistry, like you said, with Cade and Eric all back at Michigan, I think is going to obviously be a seamless transition here at Iowa. So I could see Eric having a bigger year as well.
This is what leads me to feel like our offense could take a step ahead this year. I go back to 2018 when, we had Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith on the outside, but then our tight ends were Hawkinson and Noah Fant. And to me, I feel like those two can kind of have that same kind of impact this year. I don't know whose stats will be better. Like you said, I could see all having, more receptions, more yards because of being that security blanket. Now, Lachey last year, I think, didn't he lead the team in touchdown receptions?
I would have to look.
Maybe there was I think there was only 7.
I was gonna say it couldn't be a lot because overall we didn't have many.
Yeah, but I mean, I go back to Eric's 2021 stats. That's when he was a sophomore. He caught 38 receptions for 437 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, those numbers should be better this year. Maybe not the yards, but I think he's got potential to probably have quite that many receptions, if not more, because of Cade's security blanket. So, to answer your question, I think it could be more split. I think Luke Lachey could have more touchdowns. I think Eric All could end up leading the team in receptions.
Yeah.
So
I just think like you go back, you mentioned 2018 and our offense. I think people forget everyone wants to bash Brian because, he's not a good offense coordinator. And I agree with that. I don't think he is. But at the same time, though, you go back to his first couple of years, 2017, 2018, and hell, even 2019, kind of forget that we actually put up some points, some games. And like, I have it somewhere where, 2018 specifically, where we were putting up 30, 40 points, 50 points, some games. And it kind of comes down to like what you said is we were number one, our offensive line was way better those few years. Number 2, we had a better quarterback, even though I didn't really think Nate Stanley was that good, but he was clearly better than Petrus. And then, having 2 tight ends, it's such a mismatch for defenses because it's so hard to have linebackers guard your tight ends. And then when you do want to, let's bring in let's go nickel and let's bring in an extra corner. Well, it's kind of hard too, because you have a 5'11" corner trying to defend a 6'7". So it's tough. And that's why you can create a lot of mismatches. You can do a lot of like seam routes, things like that with those guys. And so, this year, I think, all the talk's going to be at the wide receiver position, and rightfully so, just because of, Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson, all that. But man, like we got to utilize the hell out of these 2 tight ends because they are, number one, they're going to be gone after this year. They're both going to head off the NFL, and we got to use these guys because they are going to be big studs for us, especially down by the red zone. I mean, they're both big dudes that, will just body you up. And so that's what we need. And
that's not necessarily true about them going to the NFL, right? I thought they each have their COVID year. Right, Luke Lachey is a junior.
Yeah, but if they both have a good year, they're off.
Yeah,
I think.
Okay, I mean, so going back to 2018, this is where I think Iowa needs to set. Okay, so yes, in 2018 there were a couple blunders of an offensive game. I think a lot of that maybe was more so on Nate Stanley that year. But you go back to that year from an offensive perspective, our points per game were 31.2 points per game. That was 44th out of 130. I will take that all day. If that's where we can be as points per game this year, I will take that all day. We averaged 375 yards a game. I would love to be kind of around 400. That would be a great spot. Now, who knows if that's possible this year, but you just go back to that year. I think that is a good barometer of success when it comes down to our offense this year. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
That's where I'm kind of setting that bar as to that 2018 team. I'm trying to go back. I don't remember, there was that Wisconsin game that was absolutely terrible.
That was in 2017, I believe. That was after the Ohio. Yeah, that was after the Ohio State game.
Yeah.
All right. There was
2018. I know we went to like Indiana, put up like upper 30s, lower 40s. I know we played at Purdue and we put up some, I don't know. You'd have to go look, or I can look too, but I know we put up some points in some of those games that year. Hell, we played a SEC team in the bowl game and we put up almost 30 points. Like that would never happen like last year, against a good SEC team. I know we played Kentucky, but
so
they were out.
2018. Our points first game 33, then Iowa State 13, Northern Iowa 38, Wisconsin 17, Minnesota 48, Indiana 42, Maryland 23-0. That game I remember it was like 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
Penn State 24, Purdue
on the
36,
road, 24 on the road, out
10, Illinois 63, Nebraska 31.
Yeah,
those are
way better.
To me. That's where we want to be.
Well,
yeah,
and like this is why I say like this year is kind of a no excuse year for Brian. I mean, I think you have the talent now.
Yeah,
like you could, this is kind of that prove it year, and like if there is ever a year where it's like, okay, like this is your chance, like this is you don't really have a lot of excuses at this point to get it done.
Yeah, and a lot of it hinges on our offensive line as well.
Sure.
They can't protect Cade. We're not going to.
No.
Now, do I think Cade can get out of more situations than Spencer could? Yes.
Yeah.
But or even like Nate Stanley those years.
Right.
You are not giving a quarterback more than 3.5 seconds to throw without getting bombed. You're screwed. So
yeah.
The offensive line doesn't get better, and the run game doesn't get consistently better than it was last year. Like you can't expect any quarterback, even if it is Cade McNamara, to be super successful in that type of offense. You're asking for the same results.
I think with the run game, I think it's a simple fix. I mean, obviously you need the offensive line to be good, but you just got to get defenses to respect you a little bit more. And when you're putting in 9 guys in the box, no wonder your run game is going to suck. So we got to get to the point where we are getting defenses where they're not doing that so often, where they actually respect us a little bit. They respect us that, hey, we actually might throw down the field. I mean, last year we didn't do any of that. So what did defenses do? It was easy. All right, let's load 9 guys in the box because they're not gonna make us pay for it. And no wonder.
And even if they do, we don't have a guy that can complete it. Right.
Yeah.
Last year we had zero threat of any time going downfield.
And
our
that
only threats on offense were Laporta and Lachey.
Yep.
I mean, that was the sad truth.
And that is why I think Caleb Johnson is one of the most underrated running backs, because despite all that, he still put up 700 some yards last year, which is just crazy to think. You give him a chance to, number one, go behind a hopefully a better offensive line, but then number two, going up against where defenses aren't literally putting 8-9 guys in the box, because that's just a mismatch at that point. And then you're at that point, you're having to make guys miss because you can't. There's only so many people you can block up front. And when you're putting 9-8 guys in the box, it's kind of hard to block all those guys. So at that point, you're asking the running back, hey, you got to make sure you're making 2 or 3 guys miss you.
And we still ran it because, like you said, we could not throw the ball.
Yeah.
He still averaged. I mean, he averaged 5.2 yards a carry against a terrible offensive line, or with a terrible offensive line.
Yeah.
There's reasons to be encouraged.
I will say one thing, going back to all this, we talk about the offensive line, but obviously the health scare from Cade on Saturday really shows you how fast and how quickly this season could just go down the drain if something happened to Cade. Because I said it on Sunday's podcast by myself. I said, I don't trust the other 2 backups. I just do not think they have what it takes quite yet, maybe down the road. And we got to make sure Cade stays healthy. And number one, you got to talk offensive line, hopefully, blocking so he doesn't go down as much and stuff like that, or having to scramble as much. But we got to make sure he stays healthy, because it kind of showed on Saturday. We kind of forget about it. We kind of take it for granted, but it's if this guy,
if this dude happens, we hold our breath.
Yeah. If this dude goes down, we might be screwed.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is really quick. It's like it was a non-contact injury where he was scrambling, so it's like it's not like he got hit, or it's not like he, it's just a freak accident. Like that's the sucky thing about non-contact injuries, and obviously when you hear non-contact injury, you assume the worst. And so yeah, we were all holding our breath Saturday, and it obviously turned out to be a little bit better news, I think, than originally what we thought.
Yeah, better news. It still sucks though that he's probably going to be out for a little bit here in practice. And
quad strain, is that right?
Yep.
And I'm guessing, and honestly, we probably won't hear anything until Big Ten Network is there tomorrow on Friday. You'll probably see if he's practicing or not. I'm sure.
I don't think he will be
under wraps as much. From everything I'm reading, he's probably going to be out until game week. Yeah. And as much as that sucks, I've tried to remind myself he is a senior. He's been through it. He knows what he's doing. He has had time to learn.
We need him healthy.
He just hasn't had the in-game reps. I would rather have him be 100% healthy than go into the season
limping
at 80% and know the offense perfectly, and as vice versa. Like we need a guy that is in there that at 100% that can make plays and control the offense. He can learn as he goes. For one, it's not like outside of Iowa State, it's not like our schedule is that hard out of the gate. It's like, I don't know. I want him as 100% healthy. Let's get it. Hopefully in an ideal world, he plays the first half against Utah State. We're doing so well that he can just take the rest of the half off. Like that would be the ideal situation.
But if he's not going to be practicing until game week, I want him. I mean, that first game, that would be a huge game just to get, if you know what I mean? Like it'd be a good game to get as many reps in as you can, especially if you've been out most of camp or at least half of camp, But I know what you mean too, where
none of us will know until Kirk Ferentz speaks on Tuesday of game week. And even then he might say, we don't have an update yet.
That's why
I think there's going to be a lot of speculation between now and then.
That's why Chris Hassel was saying on their podcast, he was saying, I guarantee the coaches were of course it had to happen on the day where everybody was watching. Cause like Chris said, this probably happens all the time in practice and we never know about it. We would, and if this would have happened last week, we would have known because then he wouldn't have practiced it. But let's say it happened yesterday, we would have no idea about it until the first game. So he was just saying, I'm sure the coaches were probably great. Of course it happened the day that all the eyes were on us. And now I'm going to have to, it's going to be a question that everyone's going to be talking about and bringing it up. But no, from the sounds of it, everything seems optimistic. And hopefully it's just, a week or two.
I think it was also just a perfect storm where us as a collective fan base, one, has been through so much crap with this offense. And then we get to Kids Day. And he just got done completing a 37-yard pass and a 44-yard pass. And we're like, let's go. This is awesome. And then 2 minutes later,
it just goes right down the drain.
We're
I think Kids Day is a bad omen because you got Nico hurt last year. Now you got Cade hurt this year. It's God, we just don't need Kids Day.
Yeah. I don't know. They might have to shut her down after this year doing that.
Fuck the kids. No,
I'm sure Kirk doesn't love it.
Yeah, I'm sure if it was up to him, they wouldn't do it because.
No, I was going to say it's not up to him.
Yeah. Let's switch to the defense just briefly. Obviously, we talk mainly offense. Do you think the defense? Obviously, last year's defense was just amazing, led by Jack Campbell. We lost some guys, including him and Seth Benson, Riley Moss. Will this defense be as good as last year, at least close to last year?
I think yes. I mean, I think we lost. We are very fortunate to be as deep as we are on the defensive line. And I think that's going to go a long way, especially with our linebackers that are learning. Now, if it was the opposite way around where we lost a lot of people on the D line and we still had our linebacker starters, I would feel a little differently because, I mean, at the point of attack in the trenches, that matters the most.
Can I pause you for 1 second?
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of 2012 when we had a really good linebacking core of Anthony Hitchens, Christian Kirksey, and James Morris, but our defensive line was, so bad that year. And our defense was horrible. So yes, I would much rather have a way better defensive line and then, a decent linebacker, core, not the greatest, but.
And I don't think that's the other thing. We're getting a guy who in Jay Higgins has kind of grown up through the ranks. Everyone feels good about him. And then we're getting another guy who at last year was the leading tackler in the ACC, had offers from Oklahoma and LSU. I mean, he's a high level player. I think obviously it's remain to be seen like how he does in this kind of environment. But
yeah,
I mean, he played in high level football. So there will be a drop off between him and Jack Campbell, but we're getting a hell of a player. And then, man, if our secondary stays healthy, like they're better than they were last year. And so, I mean, I think we can be just as good.
You think with even with losing Riley and Merriweather?
I do. I think that overall
Xavier, I think is going to be
I think, having Cooper DeJean on one side of the field, I mean, basically locks down one side of the field. And then you have Jamari Harris, who we seem to forget that in 2021, towards the end of the year, was playing maybe our best cover corner out of everyone, and had an unfortunate injury last year. If we can get him back to full speed, like, you have a lot of talent in that secondary. The problem is you don't have depth. And if guys go down, we can see what happens. Like last year, starting Jamison Hines against Nebraska, against Trey Palmer, and we get absolutely torched. And it's unfortunate that we didn't get a guy in the portal this year. And I think, they went after their fair share. They just didn't land them.
Well, I think they didn't land them because it was one of those things where it's like, well, you're not going to probably start unless someone gets hurt. And I just think a lot of guys were probably like, well, then.
I'll add also, I think we forget to talk about Sebastian Castro because, it's just that cash position you don't think about as much. But towards the end of last year, he was playing his best ball as well. That Kentucky game,
he was stud.
He was a stud. He was all over the field. And so I think we have we talked about this last year. Like, really, we don't even have to talk about the defense because we know what they're going to do. We know how good they can be. And so I'm excited for them. I think that D-line, I think Aaron Graves is our next first-round draft pick. I think he is that good. And then, Cooper DeJean, like, yes, we know what we have. But I'm talking about in terms of a riser this year, I think that Aaron Graves is the guy to keep in mind.
Yeah, even without Noah Shannon probably might miss some time. I'm still not worried at all at the defensive line. It's just like we got guys everywhere, and then you get a guy that you don't even really think about who on Saturday looked really good, Brian Allen, just that another guy that's probably just going to help out. Who knows if he'll play a lot. I did feel a little bit better coming out of Kids Day with the secondary backups. Deshaun Lee, TJ Hall, like they had pretty good days. And once again, it's only one day, so you don't know. But I said, on Sunday when I recorded, if we can just get one guy just to step up and be that, that third guy that we can rely on, because it's going to happen at least one time this year, or hopefully it's never, but it's going to happen where one of those guys is going to have to come in, whether it's for a whole game or for a half or whatever. And you need them to step up. And I want to feel at least confident, because last year, yes, like, one of those guys goes down, I did not feel confident. We had, like you said, Jamison Hines, which I don't even know who that is, but all I know is he was a six-string corner last year.
Injuries are part of the game. It's going to happen. Yeah. And that's why we have to build depth. And so I think, I trust no one more than I trust Phil. And so I think it's just going to be one of those things that, we're going to have to establish depth and create depth as the year goes on.
I will say one other thing too. Obviously last year, Justin Jacobs getting hurt was very unfortunate. It sucked, but looking back on it, it was not, I shouldn't say it was a good thing, because I never want anyone to get hurt, but like it helped us at least play. Have Jay Higgins, because
it created an opportunity for Jay Higgins to, establish a role in the defense and this year be a veteran player.
Yeah. Because if what's his name doesn't get hurt last year, Jay Higgins essentially like a rookie going out there this year, he'd have like no game experience besides maybe special teams. So getting last year, because he was kind of like those first couple games that he played, he was very raw. I remember it was like the Michigan game. That was like one of his first games, like did not do very good, but it's like, what do you expect? Right. But those games, like he got better as the year went on. And so it was such a big thing that he was able to get some game time action this year. And then what about that other?
It says a lot too. I think it says a lot about Jay that, Seth Wallace, when he spoke the other day, said that Jay is still our middle linebacker and that Nick Jackson is moving to weak side. Like, They trust Jay that much to play that position.
Because wasn't Nick Jackson a middle linebacker at Virginia?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So who's going to be the other? Who do you think the other linebacker will be? Obviously, we'll probably play Cash a lot, but if we don't,
I think probably either Kyler Fisher or Carson Scherer once he comes back from his injury. But I'm not that worried about that group. I think it might take a second for them to establish the chemistry that Benson and Campbell had, but they're talented.
Why don't they ever talk about, I just thought about this now. Okay. So obviously we have Sebastian at Cash, but if it had to come down to it, let's say we needed him to like be a corner for a game because someone's out or something, like couldn't he just step in and be right there because like I think he'd be more than capable. I'm surprised like we never really talk about that. Obviously we have him at Cash, but if it absolutely comes down to it, I feel like he could easily go over and take over that corner spot if we needed him to at some point, if that came down to it.
That's an interesting question. I don't know, because we talked about this too. This has always been a topic, like how come Bill would never put our best cornerback on their best wide receiver? It was always, they always played their position and they know their position.
Yeah.
So I don't know
how Iowa does it. Yeah.
You never want to question the GOAT though. I will question Brian Ferentz in the offense, but I will never question what Phil Parker does.
You sometimes in Kinnick Stadium get a little pissy.
I think that's just a fan of me.
I just tell you, I was like, Phil knows what he's doing. Yes, it's not going to be perfect all the time, but the guy knows what he's doing. He's earned the right to do whatever he wants.
The standard is so high that when it's like when something like when we give up a 20-yard pass, it's like you almost are like, what the hell? But it happens.
Sometimes it seems like that first drive, teams go right down the field, and it's like what? But then it's like after that, it's like, oh, okay,
you settle in.
Yep, you settle in.
We're figuring things out, and
yep.
So
this question is really for just Kolby, because Tyler, we'll talk about this next week or the week after. But since Kolby won't be on until after the first game, what is your preseason prediction for this year, and where do you see Iowa kind of finishing, and is this a team that's going to be going off to Indy?
Yeah, I think I tried to set the bias aside, but when you look at the talent on this roster, there is talent all across the board. And I think that for us not to go to Indy this year would be a massive disappointment. I think anything outside of a 10-win year, 9-3 is still a good season. Don't get me wrong, but I think with the pieces that we have a 10-win year is very much with the schedule, with the pieces we have, a 10-win season is very much attainable. And so my predictions are 10-2 going to Indy. I do think we beat Wisconsin on the road this year, but I think we drop one that is going to piss us all off. It could be Illinois. Yeah. It could be. I think we lose to Penn State on the road. I think that game's going to be closer than what we think, and then I think we lose one that we don't think that we were supposed to lose, whether it's Nebraska or Illinois.
I said
think
Nebraska
we go into
Wisconsin.
Yeah. I think we go into Wisconsin, beat Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's talented, but I try to keep in mind that they pretty much overturned their entire roster and their entire coaching staff, and that takes time. And I'm curious to see how well air raid offense works in the Big Ten. I don't know. I still think they're going to have quite the balance with Braylon Allen because he is a very talented back. But I think it remains to be seen. And I remember their spring game. I remember reading some stuff, and I remember reading it was really bad. Who knows? Obviously, fall camp's different, but I think Iowa gets the win in Madison this year, and I think we lose to Penn State and either Wisconsin or Nebraska or Illinois. So my prediction's 10-2 with a trip to Indy. Probably face Ohio State or Michigan. I don't see us winning that game. I think it would be closer than what our last trip to Indy would be, but a 10-3 season to me and a trip to potentially a New Year's Six I would be happy.
What about the Cyhawk game?
I don't think, Cyclone fans are going to blow me up, but there's zero excuse for Iowa to lose that game this year.
100%.
Yes, it's on the road, but
100% agree.
And Colin, you and I talked about this when it comes. It's almost like the pressure's off now for Ferentz to have to keep this winning streak going against Matt Campbell. I'm so pissed we lost last year. That was terrible. But it's like, all right, this year we're back to square one. It's like they got the win last year. Let's just go in and take care of business and get out of there. And I would really just love, I don't know. I'm curious what you think, but I don't think there's any reason we lose that game.
It's gonna be tough, just like it is every year. But whoever starts for Iowa State, whether it's Rocco or JJ Cole, I mean, essentially it's going to be kind of their, they play UNI, but then you got to play Phil Parker's defense the week after. And if it's JJ Cole, it's like, well, this is your second collegiate game. At least with Rocco, he had a few games last year that he played in, but they were like games where, like the TCU game, he came in like in the at half or whatever.
Garbage.
Yeah. So it's like, well, good luck with that in a way. But I guess they are at home. That's the only good thing. I mean, if it was in Kinnick, especially with, like I said, having a quarterback that you don't really know who's going to be their quarterback, like I would be like, no problem at all. But
I try to take, that's where it gets weird because it's a rivalry. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
If you were looking at that team just as like a blank thing between another Power 5 school and Iowa State, and it didn't have the team face over, and it showed everything that's gone on this offseason with them and what they're returning and what their offense was last year and things like that, you would be like, okay, that's a game Iowa should on paper win and probably win by a touchdown or more. Now a rivalry comes into play and things can change. And so I will not be surprised at all if that game is close and it's sweating in the fourth quarter, but I do think Iowa gets it done. I think Iowa has too much talent this year not to get it done.
Yeah. It'll be really, I think I told Tyler this maybe last week that because I think UNI has a good shot of beating Iowa State. And I said, if Iowa State actually looks pretty impressive against UNI, that might be a little like, oh, okay, maybe they, but I really think that they could lose that first game against them. I truly think that. So
UNI is supposed to be pretty decent this year.
Yeah. So. And they have that quarterback from, what was it? Michigan State. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Transfer from Michigan State.
Yeah. So
I got a question real quick.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Kolby, what's your thoughts? Just because obviously so much in the off season about, the new Big 10 or the Big 18. What's your thoughts on it?
I mean, I think
from 2024.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's part of me that is sad the way college football is moving and that it's never going to be the same. And that, what we grew up watching is no longer what is on the TV and that it's all about TV money and it's all about money. And, but the other part of me is excited that we're welcoming 4 new institutions that are going to change up our typical matchups. Like I am excited to watch Iowa on the road at Oregon one year or Iowa in LA. And I think that's super exciting, or them coming to Kinnick. Like it creates bigger opportunities. Yes, it makes it that much harder to sustain success, but what's the point of playing the game if you're not trying to be the best and play the best? And I mean, I think Iowa has set itself up in the NIL world where we can still compete, not necessarily win the Big 10 championship, but I think we can be in that top 7 every year. And so I think there's real opportunity for Iowa to establish itself as a team in the new Big 18 conference of being a team that's going to be consistently hanging around.
And the reason I asked that question real quick is just because when you said that, there's really, this is the year to do it for the Big 10 championship to get there. I think that's part of the reason why, right? We're only going to get way, way better next year already. So I think obviously this year is the year.
Yeah, this is the year to do it. And when you also look at Big 10 West and the new coaches in the conference, I mean, hell, it's Kirk, Bielema, and PJ are the only coaches from, the last couple of years. Every other team has
Kirk
new coaches.
And PJ are the only ones that have been there, for an extended period of
time.
Yeah,
but I'm going to add, but he was also in the Big 10 though, at Wisconsin. But no, I think with the you mentioned NIL Swarm, like, man, Brad Heinrichs, what he has done. I was listening to a podcast the other day and because I think people forget how slow of a start Iowa was to the NIL thing. And it was not looking very good there for a while. It was like, wow, we're going to be so far behind. And props to Brad, the way he's set up the Swarm, obviously, finding additional ways to create some money. And I forgot what it was, but we're like, or I think Brad said it actually on a podcast I listened to. He said like we're top 4 or something in the Big Ten right now in terms for like NIL, which I was like, holy shit, that is amazing. So it's awesome.
And we still have a lot of work to do. I think that like Brad is like, we're nowhere close to where we should be members wise. But if we can get to a place where we, if he can set the bar and we get to that bar, like, and we can be constantly sustaining that number, that's great.
Hey, we need us 3 first game. We need an RSVP to the Swarm tailgate party. It's at the rooftop of Marriott. It would be fun to go to at least one, because they do it every one. But like Brad was saying, he's like last year anybody could go to it, no problem. But he's like this year, he's like we've gotten so many people requesting that he's like everyone's gonna have to RSVP this year, which I think that's a good problem to have. You want to have like that excitement for that. So yeah, it's cool. Obviously the beers are great. Vodka. I haven't tried the vodka yet. It's still up there, but definitely will be trying that the first tailgate, and looking forward to it. So, I guess that's really it. Oh, I do want to ask one last thing quick, and then we'll hang it up. Do you think the gambling situation is going to be a problem this year for Iowa, or do you feel semi good that it's going to be a few players. It is what it is, but we'll be fine.
My honest answer is I don't know. I think that the NCAA has been so bad about getting moving on this thing that it's leaving a lot of people in the dark, including the coaches. And so, I mean, heck, 2 days before Aaron Bloom had gotten charged with gambling on his own team, that Ferentz had said, I don't think anyone gambled on their own team.
Well, that's not really the NCAA. That's more the Iowa thing of like them.
Yeah, but I'm saying I think that proves that even Kirk is in the dark a little bit on this whole thing. And so my hope is that if it's anything, it's a small suspension for these players, and that they get it figured out sooner rather than later, so that Ferentz is not having to suspend players that haven't even been suspended by the NCAA yet, and that they're losing out on their eligibility because the NCAA can't make up their mind and can't make a decision.
I just don't get how it takes that long. Like, you get the evidence. It should not take the NCAA that long.
Guidelines.
Yes.
It's crazy to me.
But I think at this point, I think it's fair to say we obviously know of Noah Shannon, but I think at this point, he ain't the only one. So I would say there's probably going to be a few others, and hopefully whoever they are, they're not, at positions where like we can't afford to lose that guy for some games. Like hopefully it's, like Noah Shannon, for example, like as much as I'm going to miss seeing him out there because he's a really good player, at least it's at a position where it's like, we at least have guys behind him that can step up. So, but he's not going to be the only one. Like there's going to be some other players that will unfortunately probably not be participating in at least the first couple games. Like Noah Shannon, just depends on how much he bet. If he only bet a few, few $100s, it might only be 1 or 2 games or 3, So, but yeah, I guess that should do it for this episode. Unless you guys have anything else, that wraps up. I mean, that was 50 minutes, a little over 50 minutes. So
well, boys, it was fun to be back. I'm excited for a year. I hope we can all hop on that after that first game and not feel like we were feeling last year.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Coming in with,
no kidding.
I actually encourage you guys to go listen to that, because if you listen to the tone of our voices on the week before the game of feeling super excited to the tone of our voices after that game where we were like, what in the actual
is going on? And that's where this year it's like we always say, it's like we're not like for the offense. I'm not expecting the going from worst to first, right? We're just looking to be somewhere in the middle or average, right? That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. So my expectation isn't going to be, like I said, to the top 10 offense in the country. It's just it can only go up.
Be sustainable.
Yeah. How about this, Cole? You should try going to that game, because that game was horrible. That was one of the worst games I've ever attended.
And I was sitting with Mom, and I was just like, I hate my life. I hate my life.
I actually I genuinely, was like the only time I've actually not enjoyed being at an Iowa game.
Yeah, I remember leaving that stadium and I was like, what just happened? I know we won, but it's like, what, like that felt.
Didn't feel like we won.
No, and that's what I'm saying.
No,
and then
it was a sign of things to come.
Yeah, and then it wasn't even a week later we lose against Iowa State.
Yeah.
Not only did we lose, but it was also like another just
pathetic.
I went back and watched that game. I think we all forget that. Remember, we scored in like the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, I was like, here we go. This is what we wanted to see.
Yeah, it was like a 3-and-out by
next week. It was
Iowa
Nevada. And it was terrible. I mean, last year was just a mess.
Yeah, it was.
That's why there's that optimism again. But I know it's like,
yeah, last year. And the thing about last year, one last thing is like you can pin it on specific things, but it was just like, yes, Peters was horrible, but like everything else was just so bad. I mean, it was just bad. So hopefully those things improve. But all right, well, that will do it for this episode. Thank you, Kolby, for joining. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Kolby.
Kolby will be back on
Hawks.
once again. Probably, right after the Utah State or heading to the Iowa State game. Because we'll obviously go to 2 episodes a week starting that after that first game. So thank you guys for listening, and go Hawks.